clean up something like that, it keeps freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing, and doesn't melt enough to run off the road, and then it freezes again. But if you're careful, you're okay on there. One thing about that road is it's freshly paved, so there's no surprise bangs and holes like if you were on Caroline or Hampshire Hill Road. I've got a lot of complaints about those two roads.
Good morning, Wanda and Dan.
Good morning.
Morning. We know we're having technical issues with the agenda software system, so you should have received a PDF with the agenda attached to it from me first thing this morning. So
thank you.
And most of today's presentation, so if this is going to happen with any meeting, this is probably the best one for it.
Hey, Allison, the other 3 members are in the building and they're having some technical challenges, and David is helping them.
Ah.
There. Oh, you're talking, Allison, but you're on mute.
So we won't be able to live stream this. Tracy, I think Tracy's on this. We won't be able to live stream this. We will record it and still post it afterwards, but we won't be able to live stream it because our software is down.
That's good though.
But we will still record it and post it.
A rerun.
So.
Come on.
Good morning.
1, 2, 3,
Good morning.
4. We're getting there.
Mike and Jim are there. They're just getting helped by David.
Do you want to start then? Madam Clerk?
Sure.
Recording in progress.
Oh God, fix the hair. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Development meeting. First of all, we'll call the meeting to order and ask if there are any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Our first public meeting, Z22142474 Southorn Road. Welcome and good morning. Today there is one public meeting regarding a proposed development application in accordance with the Planning Act. I am pleased to advise you that this is being broadcast live on the Township's YouTube channel, where a recording of this meeting will be available. Notice of the meeting was sent by first-class mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property. Signage was also posted on the subject property to provide information about the application. All of this was in conformance with the Planning Act process for a statutory meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to inform and provide the public and Planning Development Committee with an opportunity to ask questions or express views with respect to the proposal. The format of the public meeting will be as follows. The applicant's agent will generally explain the purpose and effects of the application. Number 2, Township staff can provide further information and clarify any statements of the applicant and/or their agent. Next, the public will be permitted to ask questions and express views on the proposal, and then the public portion of the meeting will be closed. And lastly, the members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask questions for clarification on the proposal and provide comments. At the conclusion of the meeting for the application, the applicant, their agent, and if required, Township staff will be given the opportunity to respond to the questions and comments received. No decision will be made today following the public meeting on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. Following this meeting, the information obtained, including from questions and comments submitted by members of the public and the committee, will assist the Township and the applicant's team to determine next steps. Should substantial questions or concerns remain unanswered, an additional public meeting may be scheduled or a report may return to this committee if additional information is requested. Once the township is satisfied with the information provided by the applicants and their consultants, this committee may recommend the bylaw to be considered by council, as the township is the approval authority for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If in the future, township council decides in favor of the application by adopting recommendations from this committee, members of the public who have provided oral or written submissions but disagree with the decision may be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal under the Planning Act. Individuals attending the public meeting by YouTube or telephone may email can call a township's planning department to submit contact information to receive notice of the decision on the application. I now call on the applicant's agents, Lauren Arsenault and Victoria Lemieux from Morgan Planning and Development, to please present the information provided within item C131 of the agenda package and explain the purpose and effect of the application.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. My name is Lauren Arsenault, and I'm a junior planner with Morgan Planning and Development, and I'm here with my colleague, Senior Planner Victoria Lemieux, and we're available to answer any questions you may have after the presentation. I will just set that up and share my screen. Can everybody see that? Mm-hmm. Great. Morgan Planning and Go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, Morgan Planning and Development have prepared a planning justification report in support of a zoning bylaw amendment on behalf of Jamie Tofflemire, owner of 2474 Southorn Road. A zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted in accordance with a condition of a recent consent for a lot boundary adjustment, which conveyed 12 hectares of agricultural lands from 2474 Southorn Road and merged it with an abutting parcel. The site-specific zoning bylaw amendment applies only to the retained lands and will recognize the deficient law area. The subject lands are located about 1 kilometer east of the settlement area of Coldwater on the north side of Southorn Road. Access to the property is via an entrance located on the southeast corner of the property onto Southorn Road. The retained lands have a frontage of approximately 486 meters and an area of approximately 4 hectares or 9.7 acres. The lands are currently vacant and vegetated with trees and shrubs. Here is an image of the proposed lot fabric for the boundary adjustment, which was approved by Township's Committee of Adjustment in November. The zoning bylaw amendment would apply only to the retained portion of this property, which is highlighted in orange. The zoning bylaw amendment application requests a site-specific rezoning to recognize the deficient lot area, approximately 4 hectares or 9.7 acres, where 40 hectares is required within the agricultural designation. The subject lands will retain the agricultural zoning, which is in keeping with the township and county's OP designations, and the lands are still suitable for small-scale agricultural or agricultural-related uses. The subject lands are designated agricultural in the township's zoning bylaw and official plan, and they are designated prime agricultural lands by the province. The provincial policy statement states that prime agricultural areas shall be protected for long-term use for agriculture, and that is echoed throughout each level of policy. It is the intent of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment with the previous consent application to protect and enhance the prime agricultural areas of the subject lands by consolidating the croplands and preserving the retained lands for small-scale agricultural use for the long term. The retained lands are not appropriate for large-scale cash crops, but are suitable for small-scale agricultural and agricultural-related uses. Likewise, the growth plan seeks to support and enhance the long-term viability and productivity of agriculture by protecting the prime agricultural areas and the agri-food network. Morgan Planning and Development is of the opinion that the zoning bylaw amendment conforms to the vision and guiding principles of the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The subject property is designated agricultural within the County of Simcoe's official plan and the Township of Severn's official plan. Morgan Planning and Development is of the opinion that the zoning bylaw amendment application to rezone the retained lands to a site-specific agricultural zone conforms to the vision and guiding principles of the County of Simcoe and Township of Severn official plan and will support a diversified agricultural economy. In conclusion, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application to rezone the retained lands to a site-specific agricultural zone, which will recognize the deficient size of the parcel while still enabling the parcel to be developed with residential dwelling and used for small-scale agricultural or agricultural uses, such as a hobby farm, beekeeping, greenhouses, or farm equipment repair shop, among other uses. This application was submitted in accordance with Condition 1 of Consent Application B1722, which was passed by the Township of Severn's Committee of Adjustment on November 8th, 2022. Morgan Planning and Development feel the application conforms and complies with all levels of applicable planning legislation and represents good land use planning. Thank you for your attention and consideration. Victoria and I are available to answer any questions you may have regarding the application.
I now call, does the Township's planner, Brad Oster, have anything further to add to the materials and information provided by the applicant?
Thank you, Chair Cox, and good morning to the committee. Thank you. Ms. Arsenault has given a good summary of the application here. So I did just want to touch on a couple of things. So as Ms. Arsenault had mentioned, this application is brought forward as it was a requirement of a condition that the Committee of Adjustment imposed on consent application B1722. That application did seek to reconfigure two agricultural parcels by consolidating the arable lands into one parcel and another parcel with the scrub lands, which were not suitable to crop rotation. There would be no new lot created as a result of that application. So there were two lots before the application, and there will continue to be two lots post-application should they be approved. Since the consent application would have the effect of reducing the lot area of 2474 Southorn Road, being the retained lands, the zoning bylaw amendment was a condition that the Committee of Adjustment imposed to make sure that the lot area remained in compliance with the zoning bylaw. The use of an agricultural exception zone was by design to ensure that the lands do remain used primarily for agricultural uses. Staff do agree with Morgan Planning and Development that the lands do have an opportunity for other small-scale agricultural uses, as mentioned, including like beekeeping, vertical farming, or limited livestock. A dwelling could be established on the land, but would need to be as an accessory use to the agricultural use. This is required by the provincial, county, and township policies to ensure that the lands do remain used primarily for agricultural uses. I did want to acknowledge that staff are aware of the correspondence that we did receive, which was attached to the agenda with respect to drainage concerns on the property. And we do acknowledge that concern. In response to that, we did want to advise that should a dwelling be constructed on the property, a lot grading plan would be required to ensure that there's appropriate drainage and grading of the site to ensure that there's no impacts to adjacent property owners. And that lot grading plan would be reviewed by township staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. I did also just want to point out kind of with the drainage piece there that there is no new or additional development sought through this application. Today there are two lots, each with development rights, and should these applications be approved, there would still continue to be two lots, each with the same development rights. So just in conclusion, staff are generally supportive of the application, pending any comments from the public, agencies, and the committee today, and we would recommend approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Any persons present on Zoom or telephone who have either questions or comments on the application will now be invited to speak. Please unmute yourself when recognized and turn on your camera if you wish. You will be required to give your full name and address for the minutes. Please note that your comments will also be recorded and live streamed to the township's YouTube channel and will remain online. The township does not have the ability to edit the live stream, to remove any personal information provided in the course of submitting comments or questions. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak, please unmute yourself now and give your name and address for the minutes. Madam Clerk?
It is my understanding that we have no members of the public attending today's public meeting.
Thank you. Could the Township's planner please summarize any additional correspondence that has been submitted on this application and provide any further information? Or no, or have you done everything, Brad?
Thank you, Chair Cox. There was no additional correspondence received.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the applicant's agent wish to provide any further information on this application?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Do members of the committee have any comments? Member Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm certainly happy to see the arable lands separated from the non-arable lands, but I still have the concern from Mr. Lovering's letter there that, so basically what assurance have we got? Because in all likelihood, the newly created lot is going to have some kind of a development on that to ensure that the water flow isn't increased from that new lot onto the neighboring farms to the west of that. So if Brad could elaborate on when you're saying drainage plan, but is that drainage from the lot, but where does the water go from the lot? Because that's the issue, that it looks like, based on Mr. Lovering's letter, that it's balanced okay, and any increased development on this new property could throw the balance off. And we've seen in other areas of the township where it does affect the water flow into neighboring properties.
Yes, Brad.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Member Taylor. The township does have the policy requirements for the lot grading plan, and that lot grading plan must be designed in accordance with the township standards to ensure that the drainage is addressed on site. If there is any displacement of water off-site, it would have to be in accordance with that policy and our standards for such design. Township staff would ensure that any future development proposal that provides the lot grading plan, that it is designed in accordance with our standards to ensure that it's acceptable to the municipality and wouldn't impact any neighboring properties.
Okay, through the Chair, thank you very much, Brad. That answers my question. Thank you.
Do any other members of the committee have any questions? Member Jansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question, I guess, is on process. If I'm understanding correctly, this parcel of land, it seems to be approved at other levels of government. Are we finalizing the approval today, or is this meeting kind of part of the process to get to the approval?
Madam Clerk, would you like to answer that?
I think I'll leave that one to the planner to add.
Okay.
To answer.
Mr. Oster.
Thank you, Chair Cox, and through you to Member Jansen. So the Committee of Adjustment heard a consent application back in November of last year, and Council has delegated authority to hear consent applications to the Committee of Adjustment. So the Committee of Adjustment heard the consent application, and as a result of that application, the lot area of the subject lands would be reduced lower than what the zoning bylaw permits. So in order to address that deficient lot area, the committee imposed a condition requiring a rezoning to address that reduced lot area. So this rezoning is a step in that process by the committee considering the consent application and making this rezoning a condition. It in no way requires or fetters the committee or council to approve the zoning application. This application must comply with all applicable policy as required under the Planning Act. So this is just kind of another step in that process. The consent application has already been considered by the Committee of Adjustment, and now this rezoning, which was the condition, is now up for consideration by the Planning and Development Committee.
Does that answer your question, Member Jansen?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Oster.
You're welcome.
Any other members of the committee have any questions? If there are no further comments, I declare that the public meeting on this proposal is closed. And I guess we need a motion, Madam Clerk.
Certainly. So the motion reads that planning report number P23-001 dated January 18th, 2023, with respect to zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z2214 for the subject lands located at 2474 Southorn Road be received. And further, that a draft zoning bylaw amendment be presented to council for consideration at the next available meeting, subject to comments received prior to council's consideration of the zoning bylaw amendment, including additional submissions from council, the Planning and Development Committee, members of the public, circulated agency, and township departments.
I have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member Taylor, second by Member Burkett. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, we are going to which now? Sorry, I think are we continuing on the agenda?
Yeah, we'll continue. Our delegation is not joining us till 10 o'clock because we have the upcoming presentation from Meriden Burles. So why don't we just proceed with the consent agenda? And if we get to the planning report, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go to the consent agenda. And I would like to pull E2.2, please.
Okay.
Any other members of council have any reports that they wish to pull and speak to? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Motion reads that the agenda be adopted, including consent items with the exception of item E2.2.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member Minning, second by Member Burkett. All in favor? Thank you. Approval of the regular agenda.
I believe we just did that.
Okay, if we
Madam
did.
Chair?
Okay, so let's go to G1. Planning report, council endorsement of lot creation. Who is speaking to this? Ms. Mandeville?
Thank you, Chair Cox.
Thank you.
So this is a report that came to council or committee today as a result of a previous report. So as returning members of council will be aware, typically in the past, if there was lot creation proposed on a private road or by water access, or if there was multiple lots proposed to be created in one of our settlement areas or shoreline designations, this would come to council as kind of a pre-screen or a council endorsement prior to going to committee of adjustment. So council may recall we just had one in the fall, which did go to council for 3 new lots on Bella Vista Trail, Gloucester Pool. Essentially, after we presented that report to council, which staff had recommended it proceed to the committee of adjustment. In the past, we'd always just kind of given information about the applications, not necessarily the merits of the applications, which is what we would have presented to committee of adjustment. We kind of just would give council an overview of the applications and then see if it could proceed to committee of adjustment. So in the fall, when these 3 lots on Bella Vista Trail came through, after the publishing of the agenda, but before the meeting, some additional information came to light, and that caused staff to ask for a deferral of the item rather than the original recommended motion. So you will see the deferral motion there in the staff report. Following that, and with council's verbal direction during the meeting, township staff sought a legal opinion just to make sure what we were doing was following the processes we were supposed to be following, and to also ask about the private road issues and any potential liability council would face dealing with an application on a private road. So basically, the report is there. The end result of the legal opinion is that council does not currently have the ability to pre-screen or endorse applications before they go to committee of adjustment. Essentially, the bylaws that are in place right now and have been in place the entire time I've worked at Southorn, they delegate all of that authority to the committee of adjustment. So council does not currently have the ability to weigh in on any committee of adjustment applications, despite the wording in our current official plan. So if council did want that ability in the future, we would have to change some of the bylaws that we operate under now, and we would also have to attempt to put those clauses into our new official plan, which does not contain them at this time. So a couple decisions there that council or this committee were looking for direction on. Essentially, this committee cannot currently weigh in on these 3 applications on Bella Vista Trail. Those will be going to the committee of adjustment. So just an acknowledgement there. And then essentially we're seeking direction on what council committee would like us to do in the future.
Are there any members of the committee who have any comments? Member Burkett.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Mandeville. What advantage would there be in council making the decision if we have a committee of adjustment? Like, I'm trying to wrap my head around the benefit of going back to change the bylaws to have council weigh in on it when we already have a committee of adjustment that does that. Like, is there an advantage that you see that would help?
Through the chair to Member Burkett, no, I don't. In fact, this only happened a few times over the course of my almost 10 years now here at the township. And essentially every time something like this came to the committee of adjustment, the committee was a little uncomfortable because council basically had already said yes in their mind, but that really wasn't the case, right? Council didn't evaluate the merits of the application. Council had just kind of done this weird rubber stamp. Essentially in the past, there was very little discussion. It was essentially a rubber stamp type process. There was one exemption I can think of to that, but otherwise, no, I don't see any benefits. I think if you're going to have a committee of adjustment, you trust them and you have a committee of adjustment, or you don't have a committee of adjustment. I don't think you should investigate this strange hybrid model where council can pre-screen things before they go to the committee.
So supplementary through you, Madam Chair, if I may, to Katie. So just for the benefit of some of the new members on council, if the committee of adjustment did not, because planning department usually recommends what to the committee, what their thoughts are. If the committee did something and decided out of the Planning Act, that and only then could council override what they've done. Is that correct? Just for the benefit of the new members of council.
Yeah, through the chair, back to Member Burkett. So essentially, the way the committee of adjustment works is that they are a judicial, quasi-judicial entity. They're not like other committees of council. Their decisions do not have to come back to council for ratification. They make their own decisions. They're an independent body appointed by this council. And yes, so planning staff make recommendations. And of course, what committee members and what council members don't see on Planning Act applications is a lot of times planning staff have worked with these applicants for a substantial amount of time before the application comes to council. A lot of planning consultants don't want to bring an application to committee or council that doesn't have township staff support. So essentially, people will always say to me, well, why is it that almost every application gets approved? Well, we sometimes for months worked with someone to try and get it to a point where we were comfortable recommending approval. The only way council really can have any involvement in the committee of adjustment decisions is if they choose to appeal that decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So essentially, they can, the committee of adjustment could approve something and then council could then file an appeal over that matter. So that hasn't happened here in the past. I do know of other examples where it happened. So if there was an example, for instance, where staff felt really strongly that an application should be denied or an application should be approved, and committee of adjustment went in the opposite direction that staff really felt strongly about, we would likely bring that to council's attention and ask council if they wanted to appeal it. Otherwise, their decisions are standalone and a separate entity.
Thank you, Katie.
Member Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair to Katie, dealing with the 3 lots on hand here, there was an issue whether Bella Vista could use the existing private road. There was a conflict there. Is that still an issue, or should we, if it is an issue, how can we go ahead if they really don't have road access, if they're not allowed on the attached private road to it?
So through the chair to member Taylor's question. So there is a paragraph, the last paragraph in the analysis that speaks to our legal opinion. Because this is a public report and we wanted it to be a public report, we didn't get too deep into the legal opinion we obtained. However, if council wanted to see that legal opinion, we could certainly bring an additional report to closed session to show council that detailed legal advice we obtained. However, the last paragraph of this report says, with respect to the matter of lot creation where access over private roads is contemplated, the legal advice obtained by the township concluded that this is an entirely civil matter and the township should refrain from comment and involvement in any private road dispute. In consideration of lot creation, it was recommended that should such approval be granted by the Committee of Adjustment, it be accompanied by a disclaimer that the decision in no way serves as an implied permission to access the newly created lots over private property. For these reasons, township staff have no further comment on the private road access matter. So essentially, our legal advice was to not comment on private road disputes or private road access.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up, just that, we do call it shoreline residential, assuming you get there by water, but you can't. You have to get there by road, and technically you can't get there by road if they can't get there. So I do respect the legal opinion, and if that's their opinion, we may need it down the road.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we have a motion? And I see that the people from Airden Barrels are here.
Perfect. And just to confirm to Ms. Mandeville, we're using option 2 then, is the way council's leaning?
Sorry, let me just go back to see what those 2 options were.
So option 2 is that committee acknowledges that the subject and all future consent applications will be considered by the Committee of Adjustment and no further action be taken. That's the one we're using? Perfect.
That would be my recommendation. Yes. Thanks.
Okay. So the motion then reads that planning report number P23-002 dated January 18th, 2023 with respect to council endorsement of lot creation on prior Committee of Adjustment considerations be received, and that the committee recommends to council that committee acknowledges that the subject and all future consent applications will be considered by the Committee of Adjustment and that no further action be taken.
Thank you very much. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member McIntyre, second by Member Burkett. All in favor? Thank you.
Perfect.
Madam Clerk.
And with that, our 9:30 presentation is here.
Welcome.
If Mr. Williams and Ms. Skinner would like to show themselves, that'd be lovely.
Cameras on? Yeah, can you see it?
That'd be lovely.
Good morning.
I didn't know if our CIO wanted to do introductions, but essentially they're here to speak to you with respect to municipal restructuring and go from there.
Madam CAO.
Thank you. Yes, this was just a follow-up from an item that council brought back and brought to the table in an earlier session to have a open session education process or education session on the annexation process. So we've invited Mr. Williams and Ms. Skinner to give that presentation to us. So thanks for coming. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, and Mr. Mayor and members of council. We're going to be talking about municipal restructuring with a focus on annexation and boundary adjustment through the provisions of the Municipal Act as it was introduced by the Savings and Restructuring Act back in 1996. And that's the restructuring or boundary adjustment provisions that I think members of council are likely the most familiar with. Previous to 96, annexations and boundary adjustments were effected through a very different regime, which ultimately ended up at the Ontario Municipal Board, who would make a decision. With the introduction of the Savings and Restructuring Act in 1996, the province attempted to sort of leave it up to municipalities to come to their own decisions. And there were some elaborate rules. My colleague, Ms. Skinner, will get into this when we get further through the slide deck for notice, this sort of so-called double majority. But on the original legislation, if there was a restructuring proposal that had been endorsed in accordance with the rules and presented to the provincial government, they had no discretion except to approve it. So it was an attempt to, I suppose, both empower municipalities, and the province in 1996 wanted to get rid of municipalities. And they were fairly successful because there's about 360 or 370 fewer municipalities following the introduction of the Savings and Restructuring Act today than there were before. That legislation essentially sort of found its way into the current Municipal Act with some modifications. And one very significant one was the province no longer has to approve restructuring if municipalities present it to them. And there are some additional provisions that further empower the province to make decisions. So this is a bit of a high-level background, but that's where we've kind of ended up today with provisions that were originally intended to empower municipalities to essentially amalgamate and restructure and get rid of themselves, and to leave it to them. Now the province has, over the years, kind of taken the power back. In our presentation, I'm going to go over, aside from the sort of high-level introduction, some of the sort of basics with respect to the province's power and other ways of restructuring. Ms. Skinner will go through the specifics from the Municipal Act, and then I'll drop back in at the end and go over some specific examples, including some that I had some personal involvement in pursuant to the Savings and Restructuring provisions when we were acting for the former and now no longer town of Lindsay. And there's some interesting lessons to be learned from what happened to Lindsay when it attempted to restructure. Now, first of all, and if we can go to the first slide, and I must confess, I'm entirely ignorant on how to use a PowerPoint presentation, especially virtually. I mean, if we're doing, you know, kind of overhead slides and we had a projector, I'd be okay. But if we could go to slide number 1, thanks, Andrea, and to the next one that says the province has the final say. It's the next one after that. Okay, that's great. Thank you. There's often been a perception that municipalities have some right to exist or some separate, if not constitutionally conformed existence, at least through convention. And to some extent in the United States, that's true. Municipalities seem to have some sort of separate right to exist and some separate rights to autonomy. That's not the case in Canada and, of course, in Ontario. And that issue was tested with the introduction of the City of Toronto Act, 1997. And as people may recall, the Harris Conservative government enacted legislation which amalgamated all of the constituent municipalities within metropolitan Toronto into one large city called the City of Toronto. It was very controversial, and as I lived in the City of Toronto and did at the time, it was not something that a lot of people wanted. It didn't come about through any kind of local groundswell. It was the province trying to, I suppose, rationalize the governance of the City of Toronto and perhaps save themselves some money. The legislation was actively opposed by a number of constituent municipalities within the former Metro Toronto, led by East York. And the decision that came out, and we've quoted a few lines from it, was quite clear that municipalities in Ontario have really no autonomy. They have no right to exist. They have no separate, I suppose, existence through convention or through the Constitution or otherwise. So the province has complete authority to do whatever it likes with municipalities. And you may also recall a much more recent court case where the current government of Mr. Ford reduced the number of council members in the City of Toronto and the number of wards. That was challenged before the courts. In that case, on the basis of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the people were being denied some constitutionally protected right to representation and assembly. Surprisingly, in my mind, the applicants were successful at first instance, but they lost at the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal decision again reiterated the concept that the province has the ultimate authority to deal with municipal institutions, including the manner in which people are represented. So with that said, I think we've got to go into this understanding that the province can really do whatever it likes. And if we could go to the next slide. Thanks. So the other obvious way to affect restructuring, not going through the Municipal Act, is through legislation. And as you're in the county of Simcoe, you would be quite familiar with that because the County of Simcoe Act 1993 got rid of a number of municipalities within Simcoe County and created essentially the current structure. So that is one of the ways that restructuring in a big sense has come about and is obviously an exercise of the province's constitutional authority over municipalities. And if it's done legislatively, there's really not too much that can be done to stop it. Certainly, there can be influence brought upon the province, both at a, I suppose, staff level and also through committee hearings and so forth. But ultimately, it's up to the province to do what it likes. So we've got the City of Toronto Act, which we heard about, Ottawa-Carleton. And Ottawa-Carleton, like the City of Toronto, in, I think, about around 2000 and maybe two, was actually amalgamated all of the constituent municipalities into the City of Ottawa. So similar to what happened to Toronto in 97, happened to the various municipalities in Ottawa, Carleton, like Nepean, etc. And a more recent legislative restructuring boundary adjustment was Barrie and Innisfil annexation, 2009. And we'll come to that as examples, but that certainly Barrie and Innisfil have had a very long history of highly controversial boundary adjustments as Barrie urbanizes, sort of going south towards Toronto, and is constantly looking for new land to build on in Innisfil. So that's it for me for now, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Skinner, who can take you through the specifics of the Municipal Act provisions regarding restructuring.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll just make sure everyone can hear me. I see a nod. Thank you, and good morning, Your Worship and members of Council. So I'm going to just take a step back and go right into the Municipal Act. And if I can get the slides moving, the starting point is what constitutes a municipal restructuring. And the Municipal Act sections 171 to 186 deal with municipal restructuring. Restructuring means annexing part of a municipality to another municipality, annexing a geographic area that does not form part of a municipality to a municipality, amalgamating a municipality with another municipality, separating a local municipality from an upper tier municipality for municipal purposes, joining a local municipality to an upper tier municipality for municipal purposes, dissolving all or part of a municipality, and incorporating the inhabitants of a geographic area as a municipality. So there's a number of scenarios to which these provisions in the Municipal Act apply. The Municipal Act sets out the purposes of a restructuring, and those are to provide for a process which allows municipal restructuring to proceed in a timely and efficient manner, to facilitate municipal restructuring over large geographic areas, and to facilitate municipal restructuring of a significant nature, which may include elimination of a level of government, transfer of municipal powers and responsibilities, and changes to municipal representation systems. There aren't any reported cases under this section, but the statement of purpose is important. It's an expression of government policy. So, in theory, it could provide ammunition for a challenge to a restructuring proposal. So in addition to any challenge to a restructuring proposal that might be brought on either jurisdictional or procedural grounds, a restructuring could be opposed on the basis that it fails to meet the stated purposes or one of the stated purposes of this section. There are a few different avenues that are available for municipal restructuring. The first is a municipal restructuring proposal under Section 173. The second is a restructuring commission established by the minister under Sections 174 to 178. And I'll just pause here and say that there is a provision in the Municipal Act that says that Sections 172, which is the definition of restructuring I took you to 179. So that would include 1 and 2 here. They don't apply to the cities of Toronto, Hamilton, Ottawa, the Greater Sudbury, Haldimand County, or Norfolk County, or a regional municipality or its lower tier municipalities, except with respect to minor restructuring proposals, which apply to any municipality. And I'll deal with those a little bit later in the presentation. So that's just sort of a caveat. I'm not sure that it's relevant for your purposes, but I just wanted to let you know that. The third option, incorporation, annexation of unorganized geographic areas and dissolution by the Ontario Land Tribunal pursuant to sections 180 to 183. This was a long-standing authority that applied previously to the entire province. But as a result of the Savings and Restructuring Act in 1996, it was restricted in its application to only unorganized territory. So it's very, very limited in scope, and I'm not planning to deal with it further. There also was a fourth restructuring method historically that involved an application to the minister and the appointment of a restructuring committee, and that was eliminated through the repeal of the Municipal Boundary Negotiations Act. So this slide sets out the two processes I've just mentioned: the municipal restructuring proposal under Section 173, and the restructuring commission under Sections 174 to 178. So dealing first at a high level with the municipal restructuring proposal. That's where the local municipality or municipalities take charge in preparing a restructuring proposal. It requires the support of a double majority, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that is in a later slide. And the minister is authorized to implement the proposal by an order if it meets the requirements of Section 173, which are lengthy. We've attempted to summarize them through this presentation, but they are lengthy. And I should note, under the Section 173 process, there is also the requirement for consultation with the public and at least one public meeting. The second process, the restructuring commission, that's where local municipalities have the option to seek assistance from the minister. And if that assistance is sought, then the minister establishes a commission to work on the restructuring with the municipality. And the commission is required to consult with the affected municipalities and to hold at least one public meeting. It's the commission that prepares the restructuring proposal, and it's the commission that's authorized to issue a commission's order to implement the proposal. This is a slide that we found on the Municipality of Central Elgin's website. It's a very useful infographic. Lots of detail in it, but I'd commend it to you. This was prepared, as I understand it, by Central Elgin to clear up some statements that were made, or some lack of clarity about some land that was being developed in a neighboring municipality. So it's not really important for our purposes, the background, but it is a useful infographic that I just commend you to look at in more detail if you've got the time and inclination. So this slide deals a little bit more fulsomely with the process of a Section 173 municipal restructuring. And it lists the items, the key items involved. The first is to make a request to the other municipality or municipalities for restructuring. And then, in almost all cases, there's a negotiation of a draft restructuring proposal and a boundary adjustment agreement. The next step would be to submit that draft restructuring proposal in the form of a report to the minister for the minister's initial review. So there's a lot of work on the back end, I would say, that gets done between the municipalities before the minister is engaged, and that's done by way of a proposal or what's called a report under the legislation. As I mentioned, there's then the requirement to hold at least one public meeting and to consult with all prescribed persons or bodies, and there are relevant regulations under the Municipal Act that deal with municipal restructuring processes. The council and electors of each affected municipality then vote on the restructuring proposal, which requires a double majority. And if that's approved, then they submit the final proposal and the report to the minister for implementation. If the minister is of the opinion that the proposal and the report meet the requirements of Section 173 and the regulations, then the minister may issue an order to implement the restructuring. And case law, I would just say case law has confirmed that consultation must be, the consultation must be inclusive. And so that's really kind of one of the I guess themes or underlying themes to keep in mind when you're going through a municipal restructuring process. In terms of what's actually contained in a restructuring proposal, the minister has very broad discretion to decide the content and the form of the restructuring proposal. And so it's really a case-by-case assessment. I've put on here Section 173. As I said, the form is not prescribed by regulation, and the report that the minister receives is really on a case-by-case basis, something that the minister considers in terms of whether it's appropriate in the particular circumstances. A boundary adjustment agreement is not something that's mandated to be entered into, But in our review of past approved municipal restructurings, it is the case that municipalities generally do enter into a boundary adjustment agreement to make clear the general terms of the restructuring and to deal with the transfer of assets, liabilities, rights, and obligations as between the affected municipalities. So here's the definition of double majority is found in one of the regulations to the Municipal Act. It's defined as being a majority of the local municipalities with more than half of the electors in all the local municipalities. The support of a local municipality or county is to be expressed by bylaw or resolution. I've just noted a case there where a restructuring proposal was squashed by the Court of Appeal despite receiving support by 2 municipal councils because the councils failed to obtain the approval of the residents in the unorganized territory affected by the proposal as required by the regulation. So again, there's detail in the regulation that's important, but these are the broad provisions that apply. Subsection 173 sub 4 of the Municipal Act speaks to how a restructuring proposal gets implemented. Again, under the Section 173 proposal, not the commission process. The minister may, by order, implement a restructuring proposal in accordance with the regulations if it's satisfied that the restructuring proposal and the report meet the requirements. And if, in the opinion of the minister, the proposal and the report comply with the restructuring principles and standards set out in the Act. So the minister does have a broad discretion. The minister must publish the restructuring order in the Ontario Gazette and file it with each municipality to which the order applies. Municipalities must make the order available for public inspection. And it's noted here that a minister's order is not a regulation under the Regulations Act. There are provisions under the Municipal Act, and this isn't covered in the slides, but I just wanted to note that allow for the amendment of a proposal. They allow for the minister to consider an amended proposal before the initial proposal has been implemented, or if the initial proposal has been implemented, the minister can make another order to implement the amended proposal. And the Act sets out some conditions that must be met with respect to amended proposals. The other note that I wanted to make is that there are provisions under the Act with respect to minor restructuring proposals. And the Act makes minor restructuring proposals available to all municipalities. And the Act also contemplates that the minister might make regulations that provide for different support requirements for restructuring proposals that are minor. The minister hasn't done that, at least not at this point in time. But there is a provision. There are provisions in the Municipal Act that allow for minor restructuring proposals. And a minor proposal it's minor if it provides for one or more annexations of part of a local municipality to another local municipality. If it doesn't provide for any type of restructuring than what I've just described, and if, in the minister's opinion, it's minor in nature. So there's a specific definition and concept under the Act with respect to minor restructuring proposals. In terms of challenges to restructuring proposals, and again, the focus of this has been on the Section 173 restructuring proposal. Prior to any restructuring proposal being implemented, there's some potential issues. And of course, if it doesn't meet the content and form that the minister is looking for, if the municipalities haven't satisfied the form of proof of support that the minister requires under the Act, And if they're, and the third bullet point on the screen there says the required bylaws or resolutions demonstrating a municipality's support for a restructuring proposal may be challenged on the grounds of illegality pursuant to section 273. So that's just sort of a general statement to be aware of. And then post-implementation, it's possible that an application for judicial review might be brought, alleging that the minister's decision is unauthorized or illegal for failure to comply with the required procedures. And the other avenue would be an application under the rules of civil procedure, alleging that the restructuring fails to meet the mandatory stated purposes of a restructuring. So there are, challenges that can come up at virtually any point throughout the process. Those are a few of the main ones that we see from looking at the case law that's considered provisions under municipal restructuring. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Williams to go through some examples of approved restructurings.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. I'm going to go through 6 examples, a couple of which I had some personal involvement with. The first one, sorry, and that shouldn't be the Township of Lindsay, that should be the Town of Lindsay and Township of Ops. We acted for the former Town of Lindsay, which was a local municipality within Victoria County. In the late 1990s, it had become, a couple of things became apparent. One was the Town of Lindsay, which was a fairly old sort of 19th century town, was very dependent originally on the railways for as a transportation hub in that part of Ontario, was experiencing growth pressure, but had very little room within which to grow. And Lindsay, it's a fairly charming place, and it's a fairly urban, old Ontario town. Adjacent to it was Ops Township, which was a largely rural agricultural municipality. There was a lot of pressure to develop subdivision type homes adjacent to the Town of Lindsay, and there were problems with respect to servicing. Lindsay had received provincial money to upgrade its sewer and water systems. Ops, I believe, had very limited servicing capacity, and new development adjacent to the boundary with Lindsay was largely on private or semi-private services, which the province didn't like, especially didn't like water and having private sewers. So these problems were being experienced by both ops, who were having difficulty determining how they were going to deal with these development pressures and service, and Lindsay, which needed some more land. So negotiations took place under the provisions of the Savings and Restructuring Act. And as you can see, that was a fairly early use of the legislation, and resulted in the sort of double majority with Victoria County, the Township of Ops, and the Town of Lindsay, allowing for the annexation or transfer of this border area to the Town of Lindsay, and that was all done consensually. My recollection is the biggest issue for the Township of Ops was the loss of existing and anticipated tax revenue through the loss of this urban area. And I think it was the only sort of semi-urban area in Ops. And so the agreement, the order and the agreement that were entered into allowed for a phase-in of taxes in this sort of newly amalgamated area, and the remission of taxes over a period of time, which scaled down back from the town of Lindsay to the township of Ops, so there wouldn't be a sudden loss in their tax base. From what I understood, the amalgamation seemed to go relatively well, and seemed to work out for all parties involved, although for another reason, it was not to be terribly long-standing. Not too long after that, we, as instructed by the town of Lindsay, began implementing a restructuring proposal that would have resulted in the town of Lindsay being separated from the county of Victoria. So essentially, Lindsay wanted to become sort of what I believe Aurelia and Barrie are now, which are separated cities, or in this case, a separated town. Although geographically within the county, it would be separated. And Lindsay, as I say, was a fairly urban, small municipality, but still fairly urban, and didn't see itself as having much in common with the rest of Victoria County, which Lindsay thought it was getting held back, or with the surrounding municipalities. So they attempted to separate through a restructuring proposal. The discussions that were undertaken with the other municipalities, not surprisingly, didn't result in anything positive. And so Lindsay then asked the province to establish a restructuring commission. And Lindsay had hired various consultants to show why, from an economic and other basis, it made a lot of sense for the town of Lindsay to separate from the county. A commission was established. I believe it was Mr. Harry Kitchen, who was a municipal economist. Hearings and so forth and public meetings were held. And my recollection is around that time, the provincial representative from Victoria County, Mr. Chris Hodson, who had been a junior cabinet minister in the Harris government, was elevated to Minister of Municipal Affairs, who obviously could exercise a fair bit of control over what happened. And what happened with the commission was the commission came up with a recommendation that not only would the town of Lindsay not be separated, but it would essentially be amalgamated with all of the other municipalities within Victoria County to create the city of Kawartha Lakes, which was a really strange proposal and ultimately a strange result, as much of Kawartha Lakes, at least in the north, is on the edge of the Canadian Shield. It's very sparsely populated. It's also a pretty vast area. So you had a city municipality which was largely uninhabited and really contained only one urban area, which was swallowed up by everybody else. The commission's recommendation was ultimately accepted by Mr. Hodson, who did not run again, as it was extraordinarily unpopular in Victoria County. And there was an attempt in, if I can just look it up, in around 2003, following a plebiscite in Kawartha Lakes, where everybody said, we want to go back to the way that we were. Notwithstanding that plebiscite, the then Minister of Municipal Affairs said that, no, we're not going to undo the city of Kawartha Lakes. You're going to remain as a large city municipality that no one within it seems to like. So a couple of lessons here. One is that obviously the province can do whatever the heck it likes, either through legislation or through a commission. And even having as your provincial representative, the Minister of Municipal Affairs doesn't really seem to do you too much good. Secondly, you never know where these commissions are going to go. As I say, we had our instructions were to try to get the town of Lindsay out of Victoria County. Instead, Lindsay got absolutely buried within Victoria County in a way that it had not imagined. So, as I say, you never really know where these things are going to end up. And it was, as I say, a kind of shocking result for the town of Lindsay and for the rest of Kawartha Lakes. Rest of Victoria County, Kawartha Lakes did not want Lindsay to separate, but they certainly did not want to be amalgamated into one big city municipality. And once that happens, it's hard to unscramble the egg. So if we can go to the next slide. That's Peterborough Autonomy Monaghan annexation. That was an annex or a restructuring that was initiated quite a while ago, but didn't actually take effect until relatively recently. And it was modified quite substantially in accordance with the rules. So as Ms. Skinner has gone over, there are certain rules for having public notice, public meetings, and then the double majority. And that happened in the modification to the annexation. And what's interesting here is that, as is often the case here, there was a boundary adjustment which allowed for lands to go to Peterborough, to allow for further urban development, but also it contemplated the servicing of the township from the city of Peterborough. So it kind of went both ways. So some urbanization that was going on in Autonomy South Monaghan was going to be serviced by the city of Peterborough. Peterborough got some of Autonomy South Monaghan's lands, and it seemed to be a fairly, I don't know, even-handed annexation boundary adjustment. The township got some servicing capacity so it could proceed with a certain degree of urban development. City of Peterborough got some additional lands. And as I say, it was modified as things went along, as Autonomy actually needed more servicing capacity, which in fact it got. And as you can see, because it's within a county upper tier system, you need to have the county on side as well as the various municipalities. We do have in material that we provided to your CAO further details on this particular amalgamation and boundary adjustment, including reports from the municipalities, a boundary agreement, etc. If anybody wants to dig a bit further into what the nitty-gritty of these things are. The next one is Ingersoll Southwest Oxford annexation. And that was a boundary adjustment, quite a large one, that was effected in order to allow the development on services of a car assembly plant. There had been, I think, a number of attempts to see how that was going to be effected and how that was going to be serviced. But what happened was a consensual boundary adjustment, which was quite large. And it provides some illustration in the order. As Ms. Skinner has indicated, the province issues a order under the Municipal Act. It's not a regulation dealing with the actual boundary adjustment, which then gets fleshed out through a boundary adjustment agreement. And this one has some of the sort of typical provisions. And again, this material and other material was provided to your CAO if, I suppose, if anybody wants to dig a bit deeper into the nitty-gritty of these. So it provides for the annexation at a certain time. It says all real property of the township, including any highway, street fixture, water line, or sewer main of the annexed area described in the schedule, or easement and restrictive covenant running with the land described in schedule, vests in the town on January 1st, 2021. And certain assets and liabilities are held back that are set out in a schedule. The lands are described, and there's provisions that litigation commence prior to the effective date with respect to the annexed territory remain the obligation of the township or county. The big interesting one, again, is assessment taxes and tax phase-in. So as with the Ops Lindsay matter that I was involved in, the minister's order provides for a phase-in of tax increase, and also that some of the taxes are remitted back to the township for a period of time so as not to overly upset their municipal budgets. There's also provision that most bylaws of the city of Ingersoll, following the effective date, immediately apply in the subject lands, with several exceptions, and those would include zoning bylaws. Which the old zoning bylaws from the township remain in full force and in effect until they're repealed or modified by the city of Ingersoll. And that makes sense that people don't lose whatever planning permissions they had. Official plans that applied to the subject lands then become official plans of the new city until they're modified. Bylaws of the township that confer rights or obligations also continue in effect. So that's sort of the big issues that come along here. And then there's a very lengthy boundary adjustment agreement that flows from that order that fleshes out the details from the minister's order. And in this case, it's about 20 pages long. As I say, it's a fairly long agreement and obligates the township to provide certain of its the property to the city of Ingersoll, plans and studies, etc., what goes on with bylaws, etc., in some further detail. So it's an interesting illustration of how a relatively recent annexation is effected by the province, and the types of issues that arise and are dealt with in the order, and how those are dealt with in the boundary adjustment agreement. If we can go to the next one, Guelph Aramosa annexation. This one, again, pretty recent. Actually took effect only a few weeks ago. And that came about as a result of environmental issues. Guelph was concerned about groundwater supply. There was a quarry that was somewhat archaic but still in operation. There was a desire to end that, and it was essentially a bit of a problem, maybe a bit of a liability, and so it went into the ownership and control of the city of Guelph. And again, there's an order which we provided. It's a little different because in this case, it's not urban land or urbanizing land that is an issue, not as much of a concern over assessment and taxes, but there are some other issues, and they're dealt with in the minister's order, again, which we have provided. And we didn't see, at least as of yet, a boundary adjustment agreement. This one's a little simpler, but as I say, it's kind of a more interesting motivation, which essentially, I think Guelph is taking on essentially a liability, which I suppose it wants to have control over what goes on, but it's not getting much of a bonus here. Whereas the township actually is getting rid of a problem. So that's another very recent example. And then finally, if we can go to the end, this is one that you probably have heard some about, which I can recall issues with Barrie and Innisfil going on for almost as long as I've practiced law, and maybe even longer. It just seems to be a perennial issue that Barrie needs additional lands as it moves south and expands. Innisfil and Barrie never seem to be able to agree to anything, and the result is often legislation of certain types. And there has been legislation floating around for many years, including the establishment of what people had thought was a fairly fixed urban rural boundary between Barrie and Innisfil, where development was frozen in parts of Innisfil. But that seems to have ended with this legislation, and it's the annexation of, as you can see, a fairly large piece of property, 5,600 acres, done legislatively. I don't think there was even an attempt to use the Municipal Act provisions. Some of the rationale that was used in our understanding was that allowing this further implemented the Places to Grow Act and the growth plan, given the desire for Barrie to be a focus of growth in this part of Simcoe County. And it was strongly opposed by Innisfil, not surprisingly, and strongly supported by the city of Barrie. And obviously, the province went along with what Barrie wanted. Again, a political decision, and one that one sees with respect to some of these larger and more controversial restructurings, annexations, etc. So the real biggies seem to be done through legislation. And certainly there is a history in Simcoe County of restructuring being effected through provincial legislation, somewhat more so. I'm not sure if we found many or any examples of the consensual restructuring that one finds through the Municipal Act. So again, those are some examples, and I think the lesson that one gets is that it's largely a matter, unless municipalities are able to agree. Sometimes they can, often they can't. At the end of the day, the province holds all the cards, and the province will, for various public policy and political reasons, effect Annexations will effect very substantial restructuring, even ones that are tremendously unpopular, such as the City of Toronto one and City of Kawartha Lakes. And as I say, in Kawartha Lakes, it was a bit surprising because Chris Hodson was the local member and was the Minister of Municipal Affairs, but seemed to go along with, I guess, his cabinet colleagues, because I don't think if he was listening to his constituents, he could have supported the creation of Kawartha Lakes. Anyway, that's about it. We're happy to answer any questions and look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk or Madam CEO, do we continue on and have questions right now?
I would suggest that's appropriate.
Okay. Any members of committee have questions or concerns or looking for any more information?
Phil Brennan, member Brennan here. I'm not sure the audio and visual seems to be locked or gone for me, so I can't. Can you hear me?
I thought you were doing a lot of reading. Sorry. I'm
following this deck. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to speak to something, Mr. Member Brennan?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I don't know to the chair. I have 7 questions. So, do you want me to just ask 1 or 2 at a time? How would you like to approach this?
Maybe you should just do 1 at a time and have them answer, so it's not too much.
Thank you.
They can figure it out.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this presentation. It is very enlightening and much appreciated. I have to go to the slide on what is the process to a Section 173 municipal restructuring. On bullet 4, the comment about at least 1 public meeting and consult with all prescribed persons or bodies. And I see in the following chart, it clarifies that. It basically says that each entity must have this public meeting, suggesting to me that there is no choice between, in this case, Oro-Medonte, Severn, and Orillia, in that they must do some sort of coordinated public review. And I'd like your comment on that. Is this correct?
You would like that question directed to Mr. Williams or Ms. Skinner?
Whoever feels more comfortable is fine by me. Thank you, Chair.
It would seem that that would be the case, that if one was to go through the consensual Municipal Act provisions on restructuring, that those meetings would be held. But I'll defer to Ms. Skinner if I've got that wrong.
That's my instinct. But the regulations are quite complex, so I'd have to do another review to find out exactly how it would work in that circumstance that you've just described, sir.
Okay, well, thank you. It's just that up until now, I was led to believe that this is Aurelia's baby and we just got to do what they say. This clearly indicates it is not the case unless some sort of review says otherwise. To me, what's missing in the process now, assuming that we continue on the process that we are, that in fact a degree of cooperation is legally, if not ethically, required. I just wanted to check on that. My second question relates to page 13 of the slides. The general terms of restructuring and to deal with the transfer of assets, liabilities, rights, and obligations as between the affected municipalities. I think you've addressed that there have historically been some deals where the impact of tax loss is, well, somewhat mitigated. It certainly doesn't sound like it's a long-term solution. At the end of the day, the losing, if I will, municipality pretty much loses the tax base from what I can see. But at least there is some time to adjust, both on the behalf of the residents of the looning municipality, where there will be tax increases, assuming Orillia annexed parts of our area, that because their taxes are significantly higher, and losses by the municipality. So my question here is that if Aurelia was to be successful in annexing an area where we lose the tax base and an agreement is going to be developed, does Aurelia get to argue that they're going to, because they would have, the only reason they would want to do that in my mind is they would have to put in sewer, water, they would have to spend some money to allow developers to use the vacant land within the area they annex. That's the only way I can see it would be done. So would that be a credit in such a discussion for them? Or is that not on the liability asset scale?
That's getting a little particular with respect to a specific, I guess, potential boundary adjustment. And our understanding was we were doing a presentation in sort of a general, more hypothetical sense, as opposed to the details. Certainly someone, if would have to look into those details. And first of all, I don't think we should be answering that question. And secondly, I don't think we could answer the question off the top of our heads without looking into it a little further.
Okay. Oh, thank you. So that's one of the things that I would expect would have to be determined through the process of negotiation. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
That in certainly the matter I was involved in, and in the more recent examples, there seems to be some agreement on how the tax increase is going to be phased in and how remittance back to the municipality, which that has lost the land, is going to get some compensation for a period of time to deal with that. That's certainly been the experience. And again, those are consensual annexations that we're dealing with, not one that's been imposed from on high.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at now. Thank you. My third question then is, under your slide on what constitutes a double majority, a restructuring proposal was quashed by the Court of Appeal because they failed to obtain approval of the residents in the unorganized territory. How does one determine whether you have approval? Like if you have an open house and you get comments and you add them up, how is that done?
My understanding, and again, I'll defer to Ms. Skinner, is that with the double majority, it's the municipalities. It's not a referendum or a plebiscite that's undertaken, but you have a majority of the municipalities involved, the local municipalities involved. You do need to get the concurrence of the upper tier. And the majority has to also be the majority of the population, or sorry, of the electors. So if you have a municipality that has one municipality that has over 50% of the electors, they would have to be part of the double majority. Even if there was, 5 municipalities ganging up on them, they would still have to have agreed because they would have more than 50% of the electors. It's expressed a little complexly or a little obtusely in the legislation and the regulations, but that's our read of it with the double majority. So if you've got 3 municipalities, obviously 2 beats 1, that's a majority. But if those 2 don't have more than half of the population of the combined 3, that doesn't work. So the municipality that has the big population, so long as the population is greater than the rest, can essentially stop or prevent what the other 2 want. And it sort of makes sense. I mean, it's a bit of deferring to municipality that has the biggest population. I don't know, Ms. Skinner, that it is a kind of complex concept. I don't know if I've explained that. Maybe you can jump in there.
I think generally that's right. I mean, there are technical provisions under Ontario Regulation 216/96 that deal with how to calculate the number of electors in a local municipality. So in local municipalities, upper tier municipalities, and unorganized territories where there's a school board that has jurisdiction, you look at the number of electors based on the names that appear on the voters list. In an unorganized territory where a school board doesn't have jurisdiction, the number of electors is the number of people who have names registered in the provincial land tax register. So again, technical, there's a technical component to this as well, and you have to go right to the reg to really dive into the nitty-gritty details.
Member Brennan, can I just interject here to remind you that like this was an information and all these more concerns that we have about what we think have coming would be something that our staff could probably answer, but go ahead and we'll see. We don't want to get too into the weeds.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'd call these weeds. These are pretty substantial questions, I think. But in any event, question 4, on the slide, Peterborough, Autonomy, South Monaghan, there was a comment that the county needed to be on side. How does that work in the case then of an annexation that currently, to my knowledge, would involve 3 townships, but yet we have Simcoe County there. So Simcoe County somewhere has a role that's not clear to me.
I don't know if I can answer it properly, but we're all underneath Simcoe County. They're our upper tier. So we do need to have their permission also, or they do need to be involved.
So somewhere, I guess I'm just getting to the point that if one looks at a process outline here, these are all things that I haven't seen in any process outline to date that to me are very significant. So that's good, thank you. So also on that slide, there was talk about how zoning bylaws would be phased in, and I find that is an interest that will interest your constituents and taxpayers to a great extent, because I would think it's safe to say that between Aurelia, which is a fairly highly developed, versus Severn, which is more rural, there's some significant bylaw differences. For instance, things like discharge of firearms, or perhaps the use of the allowance to have chickens or to have fires and all those things. So all of those things, from what I understood, I think what you said is they would stay in place until some new determinations were made. And perhaps for such affected people, there could be different bylaws by area, I suspect. But if I'm wrong on that, please let me know.
Excuse me, I'm just going to interject for a minute here. From what happened to us in '94, we followed, that's what happened. Each area kept those, and then eventually we amalgamated them all. But I think Madam Chair has popped up here. I mean, Madam CAO.
Promotion.
Sorry, you got a promotion. That's right.
Thank you. I just wanted to interject that we need to be careful about what we asked Mr. Williams for. This was an educational session on process and the law. I think, Councillor Brennan, you're getting fairly specific, and is something that council might want to take to closed session in a different time and a different forum. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, and I understand. I'm just trying to figure out what's on the plate here, and I don't expect very specific answers to some of these things. I just want to know, what are we playing with? Another question I have, I think a fair question, my last question then will be, if you have an area annexed, then you have reduced some of the, you've changed the area that you have for your growth forecasts in your official plan. So to your knowledge then, if an area was taken from Severn, does Severn then still have to meet the total growth targets for development that they had before, or are those targets reapportioned based on the percentage area that's removed? So, for instance, I guess what I'm saying is an entity could annex an area that's already pretty close to development, and then they'll take credit for that in their growth targets, whereas the other entity loses that and has to go find other areas, and therefore the associated costs associated with that kind of sprawl. Do you know how that works when it comes to the targets that are set then for official planning?
Well, I can tell you how those are targeted. I can tell you.
I wouldn't. I would imagine that in a circumstance like that, any restructuring order, which is from the province, and of course the growth plan is the province's to modify as it wishes, presumably that would be a modification to the growth plan. But again, that's, I don't think we've seen any specific examples of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Member Burkett.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to answer the last question for Member Brennan, that comes from the county, Member Brennan, and the province has delegated that authority to the county, and the county has told each member municipality how much they can grow based on past trends. So just a question for Mr. Williams. Thank you very much to both of you for the presentation. This annexation process, in my understanding, is a little different. The examples that you gave were all examples of a city looking to grow. In this case, my understanding is the province has reached out to Aurelia asking what their growth projections will be until 2051. And are their lands sufficient enough for the projections that they have? Does this change anything, or does it benefit us in this case?
Again, I can't really get into the specifics as much as I'd like to. But if the province is looking to have something happen, the province can certainly make something happen, whether any constituent municipalities wish it or not, and certainly saw that with Kawartha Lakes, and we've certainly seen it with legislatively done restructuring, including ones that were tremendously unpopular, at least for some of the constituents. So if it's coming from the province will make it happen one way or another, whether anybody likes it or not.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the committee? Yes, Member Taylor.
Yes, through the chair, I just had a question. What sort of time frame are you talking for paying back to the loser in this case? Like, is it 5 years, 10 years? Just curious, it starts at a certain level and becomes zero.
It's in the examples that we've looked at, it goes over a number of years. It's something that's negotiated, and it's something that presumably both all municipalities' treasurers, and maybe they'll have assistance from the province's finance branch to look at what the anticipated financial needs are and how they can phase that in. So it varies, but it can go on for quite a period of time. And I should say that there's no set rules about this phase in. This is done on an individual basis, but on the basis of precedent, that's why we included a number of examples that you can look at. As I say, I think we included that with material that we've sent to your CAO, that you could look at examples of how that's been done.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Williams, Ms. Skinner. It's a lot of good information, and you've indicated that you have sent more information to our staff, which will help us in the future. Again, thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with members of council and present this.
And I think we're going to take a 5-minute bio break, please.
Just Chair Cox, just before we go, Member Brennan, did you want to table your motion that you asked for?
Yes, I would like to, please. I would like to put forward the following motion based on our presentation today, and that is that committee hold a closed session at the February 15th, 2023 Planning and Development meeting to determine next steps in dealing with Aurelia and Oro-Medonte on the matter of annexation.
Okay, any members of the committee have any questions or answers or concerns? I have one. Through the chair to Madam CAO, will staff and you have enough time, or do you want questions first? Like, how are we going to do this? Because we're still really waiting to hear. I'm not sure how it's going to work.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. The answer is a solid maybe. So Chris Williams and Airden Burles can't represent the township. because they have a conflict with Oro. So I'm in the process of finding a different lawyer to help us out, which has proved more challenging because if they work with Aurelio or they work with Oro, then they probably can't be our lawyer. So I'm working on that. And I've retained MHBC to help us as well. I hope to have the dominoes together, but it may take me till the March planning committee. I'm aiming for February, but I've got a few pieces to put together. So it may be March and not
Well,
February.
yeah, because I'd rather not rush it. I'd rather make sure we got our T's crossed and I's dotted, and we've got some idea what we're doing. Member Burkett.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. And I agree, like there's also something else to the equation that Member Brennan may or may not be aware of, but the previous council, along with Aurelia and Oro, did send a letter to the province asking for a 2-year stay before any actual discussions took place. But, I'm happy to have, be prepared rather than wait for the 2 years, but it is a lot to take in. And I hope Member Brennan is okay with waiting until March or even April to give staff enough time to come back with a wholesome report so we're not doing it again.
Madam CEO.
So if council is so inclined, we would be grateful for the extra month for sure.
Okay. So
I'm fine by that. I can also the motion for to take it to the planning and development meeting in March. That is fine by me.
Or would you like it amended to say, take it to the planning meeting on the advice of staff or when staff are ready? Or is that not right?
I think we're going to have more, a lot more than one closed session as we go through this process. I don't think we're nearly as organized as Aurelia is based on their website. And I also think there's some glaring errors in their website. And I think we can't leave it too long. We don't want it sprung on us in the summer and we're not prepared. I would prefer, if at all possible, although I would be open to discussions with the CAO if there is some compelling reason to delay it beyond March, but I would prefer that March be the first consideration, if I may.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so then the motion reads, as amended, that the committee hold a closed session at the March 15th, 2023 Planning and Development meeting to determine next steps in dealing with Aurelia and Oro Medonte on the matter of annexation.
I need to move on a seconder.
I move it, Phil.
Moved by Member Brennan, second by Member Taylor. All in favor? Carried. Okay, we'll take that 5-6 minute break. Okay, please. Thank you.
Member Brennan, do you want to log out and log back in because you've been frozen the whole time? So perhaps.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here. I'll do that.
If we let you back in, it might refresh.
Okay. I wasn't sure what the devil's going on there. So, okay, I will log back in. Thank you.
Allison, can you mute Mike, please? Anybody that's not muted, thank you.
Sorry for the delay on that. It was a needed but unexpected presentation. So we'll be right with you in a couple minutes.
It's all good. Don't rush. I've dedicated my afternoon to this. So thank you.
Mr. Holmes is our delegation.
Are we still on break?
Yes, we're on break.
Okay, good. I just want to eat this.
Recording stopped.
How's your cooking going there, Judith?
I didn't cook.
You
I had
didn't?
no time. I had to go buy.
Where'd you get that? Muskoka something or other?
At the Mariposa. I made the nuts and bolts, but the rest of it I bought.
Okay.
I usually do make, but it's
I'm just
hard.
trying the nuts and bolts. Very good. Thank you.
Well, it's hard too because I like to do a big spinach dip, but then you get the whole who's touching what. People are a little worried about that. So I tried to do it. So
Careful.
well, I don't want anybody not to eat in case they think there's a germ.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're ready when you are.
Okay. Okay, welcome back. We now have William Holmes, Muskoka Wi-Fi proposed telecommunications tower, 331 Telford line. Welcome, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, everybody, and good morning.
And you've been told your limit on your presentation, the time limit?
5 minutes, I was told.
Madam Clerk? Right. Okay, thank you.
I'll try to make it as quick as possible.
Because
and
we have this information. She made sure she typed a lot of it. So if you just would like to summarize it or whatever you're worried about, let us know.
Perfect. Do you guys want me to share my screen? We'll go through it, or can we burn through the page by page?
You are welcome to proceed whatever format you want, whether it's a presentation or just summarize it and go.
Yep.
Let's just summarize and go, because then you guys can have more time to ask questions. So quick 2 seconds about us, Muskoka Wi-Fi. We are a privately owned and as local as they get. I own and operate out of just this side of Sparrow Lake. My background is construction. I'm a born and raised Bracebridge Gravenhurst boys who's been building houses up here in the lakes for most of my life, and doing so with my family. We have a tower that we want to put on Hewitt. Well, we're calling it Hewitt Tower. Sorry, on Telford line, we put a tower. So what we're looking for today is a letter of concurrence. And the reason for that is the letter of concurrence allows us to comply with the final step of ISED, so Innovation, Science, Education, Development. As you guys can see from the stack of paperwork, we do have our approvals from Transport Canada. We do have our approvals from NAV Canada. We obviously have the approval from the landowner, and we have the ongoing support of the continuous amount of client or customer leads within that area. Previously, we have put a proposal to Severn in the idea of putting more towers up for more coverage for internet to cover I would say the northwest area of Severn, which is almost 6,600 homes and businesses. We've done this, to be honest, a little bit hastily. We wanted to show you guys, one, kind of a flex of our muscle, A, how fast we could do it, and B, how effective it was going to be, and C, that we're willing to commit the funding on our end to make this thing all come together. Because in all honesty, those are the big three. We have seen in the past that some companies have not been able to pull it off, and they don't really deliver what we do. We currently service almost 100 homes in Severn, and we've done so very well. There's been glowing reviews. I know that Mayor Burkett has a few contacts in the community that even actually have our service today. And that's what we want to do for the rest of Severn. Our proposal would be to put up more towers in the future, but this one would start with this letter of concurrence. We did do the ISED policy or process, my apologies. The only comments we received back from I think 16 homes within the area that we had to mail out to was confusion, I will say, or concern about the 5 gigahertz spectrum. My understanding is she had misunderstood the 5th generation of cell phone technology, or 5G cell phone technology, with what is referred to as 5 gigahertz spectrum. And that's what we use to send out our signals. And that was the one concern. And then the other concern was just due to due process and what the tower would be used for long term. And as we provided that information that it will be fixed wireless internet only, the tower itself, again, complies with all federal government guidelines today. So, and yeah, it's kind of what I have for you guys today. I can answer any questions because I'm sure you guys have a few.
Thank you very much. Member Burkett.
You're muted, sir.
I thought I'd let you say that.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation, William. And yes, as you all are aware, internet is a problem through some of our pockets in the township. But my only question, William, is I hate to ask you this, but why was the tower put up before consultation? I'm just curious.
I have to admit, we only did it based on our gross confidence that it wouldn't be turned down. We knew the area that we were putting it into, and we knew that the guidelines set forth by the federal government, we complied with all of those. And the only final step would be to get a concurrence letter from the township council. And the idea that there's very few things that can turn down a tower. One is one of the biggest ones that everyone should be aware about is licensed or managed frequencies. So we don't use any engineered frequencies that go beyond what is called Safety Code 6. So we comply like 100% with Safety Code 6. The other one is environmental impact. We're using a piece of agricultural land that is actually a part of a driveway outside of a shed. So there is zero impact to the actual land. And then outside of that, once we had our Transport Canada and Nav Canada, so the aeronautical assessments to show that there would be no blinking lights required and no markings, it's kind of only final step would be for your council today to say, no, the tower shouldn't go up.
Any other? Member McIntyre, then Member Jansen. Member McIntyre, you're muted.
I don't. Thank you, Chair. Question to William. Do you have a cost factor, and is it what area? I don't quite understand off your page D1, page 41 rather, what area it's going to cover. How far north does it go from Telford line, and the cost factor?
So the great thing about this tower is that we picked a very specific location for it, and the elevations, as you guys are all aware, with Telford line and Stocksdale, has got a great height. With the 150-foot tower there today, this tower could potentially reach as far back as like Coldwater and beyond. Like one of the subsequent towers that we'd be looking at putting up with you guys is the Fire Station 4 or North River Road. And this is more of like what we like to call as the parent tower. So this tower would feed subsequent little towers. We've also looked into a grain silo on Carolina Line owned by a local farmer that's already existing at 150 feet. So that would be that entire area in that, again, that northwest kind of bubble of Severn. And cost, your cost factor you asked me for us, right now, we've probably put in around the range of 200,000 out for this tower, and the subsequent equipment. Well, it's a lot in the equipment, batteries. This summer, if we do get a successful concurrent letter, we will putting a solar system as well for redundancies for power, because there's nothing worse than the power going out 10 kilometers away and your internet goes down, but you still have power. So it's
Supplemental through the chair to William. I meant the cost factor for the user. What's the user expense?
This is really exciting because what we've come up against, and I love the fair competition. So we're here today. What we do in this area is our smallest plan is a 10 megabyte plan. That's enough to watch Netflix and use Zoom calls. And it's only $75 all in. I mean, receiver, rental, it's actually $74. I've been corrected. It's for the taxes and everything. We have plans that go up higher than that. So we try to start everybody at the bottom plan, and we are very flexible as we're a small company, and there is no fixed contract to that plan. We do ask for a 2-year term. But if you look to say you wanted the biggest and the best, you can get up to like 50 megabytes. I think it's around 242 all inclusive. But what we've done with our current business model, and it's kind of, I don't know how to explain it the best, but what we're doing is we're rebranding with a couple of areas. So a tower like Telford Line Tower, or the Hewitt Tower is what we refer to it as. We've looked into now, we have a website launched, a Simcoe Wi-Fi, which is called a division of Muskoka Wi-Fi. So based on the density of a tower, we're trying to reduce the cost to the users. So as the tower becomes more popular and our cost to operate the tower, it's kind of almost like a profit share / savings with the current clients, because we don't think it's fair that we have a tower that is making, $50,000 a month, it doesn't happen, but that's kind of a goal. If that one tower can make $50,000, why don't we reduce our cost, give the clients a savings? And most importantly for me, and to tell you guys, is that we'll be able to secure the clients for long term. We'll be able to add a better price to the end user, which means our competition, like, we don't want to have a race to the bottom, but it's the best way to keep people happy, right? Send them a discount instead of your typical, I call them questionable charges. Everyone's got a cell phone bill once, and why did it go up? So.
Okay. Member Jansen.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Mr. Holmes, for your presentation, as well as the documents that came with it. I understand and see from the map that you've provided that there are plenty of areas that are underserviced in Severn Township. I believe you answered the question about kind of how far the reach of this tower will be. And are you proposing that more of these towers could be popping up all over the township? And I'm just wondering, was the tower requested by the farmer in this case, or did the company approach the farmer because the land was suitable?
I'll answer the last one first. I approached the landowner because he already had an existing tower there that was owned by another company known as Ultrafast Wireless, and we had spoken to Ultrafast about using that tower as part of trying to do what's called co-location. Unfortunately, the tower there was just not suitable. It was very lightweight and didn't work. That was why we went there, because I saw a tower that was already there that I knew I could use or hopefully adopt. Your other question, subsequent towers. So one of the most important things to think about is the way our internet works is that it is truly wireless, and it works like your cell phone. But what we like to use is multiple frequencies. So we use the very high end of what's called 60 gigahertz. It's referred to as a millimeter wave beam. And it has about a maximum range of about operationally 6 kilometers. And then we go down into the 5 and 6 gigahertz, and that's got a much longer range where we can reach out to say 10, 15, and almost 20 kilometers. And then there's my favorite kind of get it done frequency. And everyone's used to this, what's referred to as the 900 megahertz. It's the same frequency that you used to have your baby monitors work on and your garage door remote operators and that kind of stuff. That frequency and the subsequent frequency we would probably use is 600 megahertz. This would allow us to reach 20, 30 kilometers, and it allows us to also penetrate through trees. And some, believe it or not, it'll actually fall into a valley over a rock. So it kind of floats downwards because it's such a long wave, it just kind of surfs its way through. And that's what we've found in our current deployment in Ramera has done really well, because it's the same topography. We've got big hills, lots of trees, big fields. And the worst thing is to have that person at that 10 or 12 kilometer mark that's sitting behind a row of trees from a farmer's field that can't get internet. So that's why we use that 3 frequencies there.
Okay, Member Minnings and then Member Taylor.
Hi, thank you, through the chair, to Mr. Holmes. So I also had that question as to how the tower came to be there. So I appreciate Member Jansen asked that. My concern is around fair competition, et cetera, and not having a clear ability based on the materials that were submitted, et cetera, to understand what we're going to end up with as a landscape. So, for example, is this precedent setting to have towers put up before there's a letter of support from the township, et cetera? So I do have some concerns based on that. And depending on how the conversation goes today, I wouldn't be able to support that. Thank you.
Member Taylor.
Yeah, it's through the chair to Mr. Holmes. So you had mentioned, and it got my attention, that assuming you go okay on this location, you're going to come west. And you mentioned North River Drive, and that's right in Ward 1. So what, and you know, there is a bell tower a mile from there on North River Drive. But so what radius would that encompass all of, like right up to Severn Falls, or what kind of area from North River Drive would that tower?
So they all typically have that same range. And again, that's why we use a tri-band situation. So as long as we can maintain clear line of sight, you get about a 10 to 15 kilometer of a very good capacity. Like the government's asked us to hit a 50-10. Our goal in 2023 is to actually triple that. We're looking for what we've already started to sell 75s. We're looking to provide now up to 150 megabytes per second. And that way that modern day homes, gaming stations, 4K televisions, and grandchildren with iPads. Let's just put it out there. They're the users of the internet, and they want it fast, and they need it fast. The additional question about this is not a precedent. This is the first tower we've ever put up quickly without all the ducks in a row. It was not a favorable process within the company. Unfortunately, I do have a board of directors, I have investors, and I do have shareholders. And they were exactly that. They wanted to make a stand to say, we can do this for you guys, we can commit the money, and we can do it quickly. I personally would like to apologize on behalf of them because I was not for this. We have 12 other towers throughout Muskoka. We are in the final stages of acquiring 2 other companies, which will have our network grow to almost 170 towers. And that's where we've done our due diligence with Ramera Township. They funded 2 towers for us. And it was very quick to do those. And then in addition to that, into the Graveners, like, Muskoka, Port Carling, Parry Sound area around, we're dealing more so with the lake associations and how the aesthetics of the towers are going to appear. So we want to work with landowners. We want to work with the township. And we want to put these towers in locations. Telford line was a very good location because we're very close to the hydro transmission lines. And that structure is actually larger than ours physically. And then there's also another tower on the other side of Telford line, which is full. Why is the reason why we didn't use it. That is larger, painted, and flashing. So,
okay. Any member Burkett?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. So let's go back. And the reason I think Mr. Holmes has placed the tower where it is situated today is because it's the highest point in our township. So placing a 150-meter tower is going to give him coverage, and I don't know, but a fair amount of coverage throughout our whole township. Let's not lose sight as to what we're trying to do. As far as the province, and we all were waiting in the previous council to hear from Minister Surma and the amount of internet providers that were going to come to this township. To this point, we've got very little other than on Canal Road, West Canal Road, Severn Street, and I think they're going up Coopers Falls Road. We know, because we're sparsely populated, that there's no way that they're going to dig and provide fiber throughout our whole township. This is a way, and the towers, and I need Mr. Holmes to explain that the towers that will be placed are nowhere near the size of the tower that's now on top of Telford line. And if you look at some of the other towers that are in the air on that hill as well, they're huge. But I need Mr. Holmes to explain to council or to this committee how the smaller towers will function and how they will provide high-speed internet to our residents that's so dearly needed. And it's something that is at the top of my list when we do strategic planning tomorrow, but it's something that is much needed at a good price. So I'll let Mr. Holmes speak, Madam Chair, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
So we will have, and we have started to prepare a second proposal we will be sending to the council for review. But I'll go back to the analogy of the mother tower, or the parent tower. And to correct, it is actually only 150 feet tall. It is 45 meters. It's not I wish I could afford 150 meter towers. That'd be nice. But what it does, and the analogy is that it feeds other smaller towers. And in the next proposal I'll send you, and it's kind of mind blowing the way we're able to do this, is that we will hopefully be able to put up something the size of a street sign post that is a 2-inch diameter steel post in the corner of an intersection. And what that does is we mount equipment roughly 12 feet off the ground, basically the height of an average pickup truck, and sometimes, a low semi. But what that does is that mother tower would then connect to this very short tower, and the footprint of that tower is very small. The power consumption is very small, but it allows us to use the concession lines, because believe it or not, they're extremely straight. And that allows us to find these pockets of the 15 and 20. To go back to the comments of the big providers won't go after them. We do that specifically because our cost to do so is less, and we're still able to provide those high speeds to the people in those areas. And the best example is Cronk Road in Romera off of Fairgrounds Road. And I will be sure to add documentation in the next proposal so you can see this tiny little street sign kind of size post with a couple of antennas on it that now provides internet to 15 homes. And we did so with, zero really delay. As soon as we have the okay that we can sit on the shoulder of the road from the township, so planning says yes, you can kind of put it closer to the road like a street sign, because we need to be just at the edge of the road there almost. We can put it up in days. So
okay, thank you. I have a couple of things. I understand that you were really keen and that everybody wants internet, but I was very concerned that you did not come to us. And you're saying that was, you gave us the reason why. But I think we forget sometimes that, yes, internet's very important, but there are still due processes that we all have to follow as we go along. And then you also did say that you may have to go higher. So do you come back to the federal government? Do you come back to us to tell us that you're going to go higher? And do you let the residents in the area, let them know it's going higher?
If I said I was going to go higher, I misspoke. We chose that location specifically because of that one tower allows us to put these small node towers. And really and truly, I don't know if I can use his name, but why not? Jamie Telefellini, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his last name, but he has the grain silo. So we're very, ingenuitive when it comes to these ideas to find structures. Put it this way, today I use a boathouse at the southern tip of Sparrow Lake that provides 32, don't quote me on that, 32 different cottages and homes, internet. And again, that thing sits 12 feet up off the water because we have to be a minimum of 6 feet off the ground for safety code 6, and that's the government legislation for our RF. But we would never go higher with that tower ever.
Right. You did say we could go higher. The other one I just wanted to comment on was, I really would hope, and you make sure that your send outs get to the residents in the area, because I do know I did get a couple of emails on someone who got lost in it somehow or other, and I don't know how you were going to do it, but it would be good. And I do look forward to a more detailed proposal from you on this, because yes, internet is very important. Thank you. Member Burkett.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. And I hope, Mr. Holmes, that moving forward, if council approves what you've asked us to approve, that you'll be upfront and honest with us on the next one.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of council, I want to say that on my campaign trail, and I know that most of us, some of us will know where Ormat Road is, and it's at the very, very most remote end of Ward 5 along the Severn River. And I thought for sure I was going to get internet problems. They are working with Muskoka Wi-Fi, no problems at all. If you look on Peninsula Point Road, that whole area, again, I thought would inundate us with internet problems. You can't even see the tower because what Mr. Holmes has done is placed a repeater, if that's what they're called, on top of a homeowner's antenna. So you don't even know what are they called now? I forgot what they're called. A tower. You wouldn't even know there's a tower there because it's part of the homeowner's landscape. So all those homes out there have high-speed internet. So I just wanted to bring that to council's attention. And I know Mr. Holmes, moving forward, if council does approve this, will come to us before he does anything in the future. Thank you.
Member McIntyre.
Through the chair to William once again, were you in a competition with someone else to get this location on Telford line?
We're in a competition with someone else. We knew that Xplornet had been going into the area, and they did have a tower roughly in the back corner of what we were trying to serve. It was a combination of the landowner's interests and as well as my investors' interests. They actually know one another. So it was a combination between, like I said, we knew that the major check marks were done. Like Transport Canada, if they say no, you just can't do it, right? The air traffic control, like you can't do that one. Nav Canada, they were on board right away. They responded within 2 weeks. The other side of it is that we knew with not having to, dig up forest or a pond or a wetland, we were going to be okay on that one. And I, again, aggressively, because we'd already spoken to the township about a proposal to have other towers go in, then unfortunately we didn't get all the way through. My board just pushed forward and said, let's show them we're willing to do this. We're willing to spend the money, is what they wanted to show you guys, to say, yes, we will service the area and we'll do it as fast as we can. And trust me, in all honesty, if you guys, choose not to give a letter of concurrence, like we'll be out that money, because I said eventually would make us take that tower down. It's not a total loss to us. The tower is reusable. It could go to somewhere else, but that's the last thing we want to do, is take a crane over there at the cost of 15 grand in a day. And then, 2 weeks to dismantle the thing and dig up a concrete foundation. That's but like Mike said, we will do what we need to do. I have painted these things with camo. We have put them on the side of boathouses, people's grain silos. We've done anything and everything to make them blend in and just provide internet basically invisibly. So,
Member McIntyre, did you have anything else?
Yes, Chair, supplemental to William. I presume now then, from this moment forward, if this committee agrees to allow you to go forward, that any kind of future smaller towers, 12-foot towers off the side of the road, anything, you would come to this committee before you did anything next time? Because it seems to me that you may get a pass on this one. I'm not sure, but to see the flavor of the day here. If you do get a pass on this one, I wondered if we could make it a stipulation that you do not do anything without our permission next time. Is that possible, Chair, to do that?
I agree.
I would have to look to the, I guess that would be, that's what this committee wants to put forward.
Make it a stipulation. Yeah.
Hey, I'll put my name on that right now.
Madam CEO?
Thank you. Sorry, the clerk was waving as well, but I think the motion could.
Okay, sorry, I missed you wave.
You could concur with this with a note that any future, requires prior approval.
Okay.
Or else they may not get a pass next time.
Member Brennan.
It's a little confusing here. It's my understanding we don't make any decision here today. Yeah. This gets referred to a report. Yeah. And it's therein, the report will make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Hopefully that lines up with the thinking going on today. Thank you.
Apologies, Madam Chair. That's been what I've been trying to get across, is that today there is no decision by council today. Yeah. Council can only take 1 of 3 actions with respect to a delegation, and the motion was going to be just referred to a staff report, and then staff will report back, and council can at that point talk about if they want to impose conditions and stuff like that. So,
okay, does anyone else have any more questions? Okay, I guess this is where it's. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes. And I think if you it's been very nice and wonderful what you're doing. And I know our residents and we are very supportive of this. And as long as you're moving along and doing things, and we'll put that in every time you want to. And then it gives us an idea whereabouts you are. So when our residents ask, we can at least be aware of what's going on and knowing that something has gone up or there's a chance that they can have high-speed internet. Can I get a motion, Madam Clerk, please?
Certainly. So the motion reads that the delegation by Muskoka Wi-Fi regarding a request for concurrence respecting a proposed telecommunication tower at 3331 Tower Line. Telford. Sorry. Telford line be received and referred for a staff report.
May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Member McIntyre, second by Member Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Holmes.
Thanks, guys. And in closing, I'll stick with you. We'll work with you. And if you have any areas specifically, councillors, you want us to go to, we will come up with a solution faster, I promise, than anyone else to get them hooked up and going. We all know who needs internet.
I think we'd just like you to go in and do it after you tell us where you're putting the tower.
Hey, I didn't want to sit here today and have this conversation the way I had it. So
that's okay.
You notice none of my shareholders are on here today, right? So.
That's all right.
All
Take care. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I believe the only thing left then is the item that you yourself pulled, which is E 2.2. As you'd like to speak to it, I would suggest that maybe Member Taylor could share it so that you can speak to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, Member Taylor, we didn't give you a heads up on that at all.
No, that's okay. So we'll open up by seeing at 2.2 from the Minister of Housing. And would Member Cox like to comment on?
Yes, I would. I think that we've seen a letter with their hands out from the government, from Steve Clark, about where we would like to see development and what we would like to see done. And I believe that we should have a staff report and have it sent to him to tell him our concerns or any ideas we have.
Okay, does anyone else have, I think that sounds reasonable. Anyone on the committee have a comment on Member Cox's concerns? I see none there. So Allison, do you have a motion to that effect?
I do. So the motion reads that the correspondence from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding Simcoe OPA 7 be received and referred for a staff report.
Okay, any discussion on that? Do we have a mover on that, please? Moved by Member Cox, second by Member Brennan. All in favor? And that's carried. And I'll pass the chair back to Chair Cox.
Thank you very much, Member Taylor. I guess we have no closed session, so an adjournment.
Sure. Motion reads that this meeting be adjourned at 11:23 a.m.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Member Burkett, seconded by Member McIntyre. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
I'm on my way.
Recording stopped.
Okay, hey, just before, oh, never mind. I'll talk to you later about it. Sorry.
You
know what? I'm glad we don't have paper. I got completely kerfluffled. Pages were all over.
I'm on my route up there. I'll give you a shout.
That's fine. I have a couple things I have to do in the office, and then I'll meet you up there.
The log cabin, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what time do you guess?